It's about that time, post-owners meeting to break out the Peacock and Williamson mailbag. Joe Milton traded from the New England Patriots. We got some draft notes, what it takes to be a great NFL player. So many great questions. So let's open it up right now in today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson. Matt Williamson back from West Palm Beach, rubbing elbows with all the owners and all the famous folks down there. And we might have to talk a little bit about Scotch versus Irish whiskey because that's a question in the hopper today. But mostly it's going to be about football, NFL draft, and a big trade, a semi-big trade happening in the NFL this morning. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen. Make sure you're subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. We talk ball with you every single day. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. So, Matt, let's start with the Joe Milton trade. We've been asked about this, and anytime there's a quarterback trade in the NFL, it's a big one. And this one's semi-big, and you could kind of see it coming that maybe the Patriots should, utilize the very small sample of the super talented Joe Milton rookie quarterback play from last year for a team that might need another quarterback. And the Dallas Cowboys lost both their number 2 and number 3 quarterbacks this offseason. And so they are going to fill that void behind Dak Prescott now with second-year quarterback, former Tennessee quarterback, Joe Milton. And interesting note here from Jordan Schultz before we get into the trade and what you think about Milton as a player and his small sample last year. I don't even know what the compensation is. I don't know if you've even seen what that compensation is.
It was Milton in a 7th for a 5th.
Okay, so not big compensation.
Yeah, I thought it might get a little more.
Not that much more in compensation than what they ended up spending on him as a draft pick, too.
Right.
He was a 6th. Didn't
make anything on your investment, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah, it's decent. Yeah. Jordan Schultz says, my understanding since Joe Milton became available at the start of the offseason, teams that showed interest included the Raiders, Eagles, Giants, Steelers, and Cowboys. The Patriots had a better offer for Milton, but chose to send him where he wanted out of respect for him, per source, and he wanted to go back up Dak with the Dallas Cowboys. Interesting.
Huh, okay. I thought this first I heard that, I thought she might have said keep him out of division or conference or something like that. Maybe that had something to do with it, too. I've been asked a million times, Steelers should just trade for Milton, though, because, all their problems will go away. I'm like, I don't know. I do give Dallas credit. I'm a fan. I know Milton was not drafted as highly as Trey Lance, but obviously traits were there for both players. And I'm a fan of either a reclamation project or a highly talented player, especially at that position. Take a crack at him, and at a minimal cost. Both those guys were minimal cost. Lance didn't work out. He's in the CFL, of course. What I think they're getting is he has great size. He can throw the football a mile. I mean, like maybe if we had that old Vinny Testaverde, who throws the ball the farthest competition, it might be him and Josh Allen are probably battling it out in the final round. I mean, they're the top 2 seeds. At Tennessee, he threw everything like that, though. I mean, it was 1,000-mile-an-hour fastball in the flat, get stuck in the dude's face mask, bounce off his face, whatever. But the little we saw in New England, they had a really good preseason. He looked like he's taking strides, more accurate, better ball placement, better ball control, a lot more touch. He can run like the wind. I mean, he's a long strider. He's not a Lamar-type scrambler. He's a couple strides, eats up a lot of space. So I see it from the Dallas side. I mean, frankly, from New England side, you draft 2 quarterbacks in the same draft. It's not exactly RG3 Cousins situation, but May's a hit. I don't know that Milton had to go. Was he threatening or anything like that? I know they have a solid backup now, but I would have wanted a little more of my investment,
That's kind of my thing is like, well, if you're not going to really get much in return, then what's the what's the push factor of trading him away? You know, there's push factors and pull factors. Like, what's pushing him out the door? Unless they're like, actually, he's not that good, and we're going to get out from under this because we're going to get a draft pick.
The league thinks he's good all of a sudden. We're going to get rid of him. Right?
We got lucky because he put a little bit on tape, but we don't think his study habits are right, or we don't think seeing him every day in practice, he's not actually going to be that dude. So if team wants to pay us for him, then we'll do it, and we'll continue to go. And maybe this is another good class to draft another backup quarterback potentially if you're. Want to go that route too and replace that pick. So interesting. I can actually see this a lot from both sides, but yeah, I don't know why you had to trade Joe Milton either.
That's the part I didn't get. I mean, this seems small, and it is small, but I mean, these coaches are getting paid. They get enough time, but I would want my quarterback coach to spend every waking minute with Drake, not Joe,
And let's be honest. Like, there's probably a better chance for him to play in New England than Dallas too, as a backup quarterback.
Probably.
So it's not necessarily better for Joe Milton.
Which brings me to something else. Like, Dak has kind of been rumored, and they're probably just rumors. They're not sources. They're not Schefter. But his name's been thrown around in trade for a little while now. He's not young. He's kind of expensive. He is expensive. They gave him money a while ago. I don't think he's on the move this year. But do we know that he's going to be there in 2 years? I don't know about that.
Could he be a big trade candidate, say, next offseason, and Joe Milton shows enough behind the scenes that they're saying, okay, we're going to go Joe Milton and then maybe draft another guy to compete with him?
They've made some odd
and
personnel decisions of late in Dallas.
They're strange, and they've got We've got some big payroll hits too, so they might say we got to.
We haven't talked Parsons much, but that's coming,
right? And Dak was first, and so if you're the first to get paid, you might be the first to go when those big years start hitting too. So it is an interesting one to keep track.
I mean, I commend the Cowboys for let's take some bites at the apple, and if we happen to strike gold, then maybe we'll move Dak and fill a bunch of other needs. Who knows? But it was nice having the Dak contract before, the rookie quarterback deal. Now all of a sudden they've been a lot quieter in free agency since then.
Yeah, they've been silent in the last 2 years. Are you familiar, Matt, with the mayor of Saxonville?
I'm not. Who is
Calais Campbell? Apparently,
that's cool.
Pro Football Reference page. I did not know that his nickname was the mayor of Saxonville. Of course, he has played with the Jacksonville Jaguars for parts of his career, but his career started in Arizona, and it looks like it's going to possibly end in Arizona as well. The Arizona Cardinals are adding Calais Campbell, the nearly 40, I think he's going to be age 39 season this year in 2025. Calais Campbell, who, by the way, model of consistency. Dude's 37, 38 season the last 2 years, playing 17 games. I mean, this dude has just been really good for a really long time. He's still a valuable NFL player at the age of 39. So Calais Campbell going back to where it all started in the NFL with the Arizona Cardinals.
Massive amount of respect for this guy. I don't know if he'll be a Hall of Famer or not, but he has over 100 sacks, which is kind of the magic number, especially for a semi-interior guy. Former first-round pick. We had heard he went to the U. I think he's from Miami, or, as a child. I think he grew up in Miami. And I heard Baltimore and Miami were still interested. But he goes back to where he's drafted, and I kind of made the joke in my head. I'm like, Arizona's a nice retirement community. It's a good place to go to, your late years, weather's good, all that good stuff. But he has been good lately. He's not just like a feel-good story. He's a former Walter Payton Man of the Year. I mean, again, borderline Hall of Famer, awesome career. And they got a bunch of young dudes on defense, go be a leader. I love it.
I mean, he's got over 15 sacks the last 3 years, 5.5, 6.5, 5. Played 14, 17, 17 games. I mean,
he doesn't play every snap. He doesn't have to,
Yeah. And obviously in his prime, we're talking 14.5 sacks, 10.5 sacks, 110.5 career sacks for Calais Campbell. And obviously tons of Pro Bowls, some all pros in there as well in his prime years. Still going though, 39 years old. So I love that. A good dude, good story. And
I think that welcome addition to any team is a limited player / big brother in the room.
Cardinals need as many guys as they can get on that side of the ball too.
They do. You think he's good for like Darius Robinson, last year's first-round pick? Of course.
Yeah, kind of similar style. Yeah, bigger defensive end that can move around, rush from inside.
Yeah.
Those things. let's talk NFL draft notes. I want to. There's two big draft conversations that I want to have, and we were asked a couple of questions about the draft, Matt. Some specific questions, and then some bigger idea questions. And one of those is how teams are treating these prospects that aren't testing. Like there's been fewer than ever before. I want to get into that and what we really should be paying attention to, because you get kind of off track at this portion of the offseason. What's really important to finding your next great football player for these NFL teams. We'll get into all of that next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Game Time. Imagine watching your favorite team live. It's so fun, feeling the energy of the crowd and witnessing unforgettable moments. Some people have season tickets and go to every single game. Sometimes maybe you live far away and you don't get that many opportunities. And sometimes you just need the right deal on the right last-minute tickets to say, you know what, I got to go to this game today, tomorrow, next week. There's nothing like experiencing a big game live in person, whether it's the college basketball tournament, an NFL game, of course, NFL. Major League Baseball is getting going now this year, and a whole lot of fun to watch baseball start this season. Games all summer long. Getting close to the playoff time in the NBA and the NHL, and getting tickets shouldn't be stressful, and that's where Game Time comes in, because you can find all those tickets and get especially some last-minute deals at unbeatable prices with Game Time. Game Time Picks, too, new feature there. Curation makes it easier than ever to find great value, better value for all the kind of sports, concert, comedy shows, theater events you want to go to, especially those bigger venues, so you don't have to wade through thousands of tickets. And how about peace of mind with Game Time? You view your seats before you buy. There's no surprise fees at checkout and a lowest price guarantee. Book with total confidence. You should always have Game Time in your pocket before you buy any tickets. And take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So prospects more than ever, Matt, are being very selective with what they do and what they show. And essentially, they're not doing any workouts on stuff that they don't know is already going to be a pretty good number. And I guess you could say Xavier Restrepo should have done the same, because he ran a 4.8 at the pro day. It's like, dude, if you're undersized and underspeeded, you're going to drop like a rock. And he was, going to be a third-round pick probably, even if he just ran a 4.5 and even a 4.6. He ran a 4.8 on some scouts watches.
Yeah,
like that is going to, you might even go undrafted. I think he'll still be a day 3 pick potentially, but you're talking about red flags. And as one of our listeners put it on YouTube, we were talking about, arm length and talking about tackles. And I want to get the right. Yeah, it was Kenny on YouTube said centimeters. We're talking about centimeters, but like you got to have a threshold in the NFL, right? And so my question is like, okay, arm length is one thing. It's like, okay, do you meet it? Will Campbell, 33 inches, is that enough for you? Can he play tackle for you? You can have that argument. 4.8 is going to be dismissing for some teams for a wide receiver, right? And so you got to have some thresholds. And for some prospects that just aren't working out at all, like how do you finish your evaluation if you're NFL teams? How do you treat someone who just says, I'm not going to run a 40-yard dash even when I'm healthy?
I just think the scouting world is changing so rapidly, with NIL and transfers and, all these guys, you keep reading like these McGinn reports, and none of the running backs want to block, and none of the quarterback or one of the receivers block, and they all have money, and Carson Beck gets a Ferrari and a Mercedes stolen on the same day. Everything's just changing quickly. And a lot of it is analytics too, 33-inch arms. I mean, that's the bottom line. You have to be that tall to ride the ride. But what if in reality Will Campbell's are 32 and 7/8? We're talking about an eighth of an inch here. Is that insanity? But there's no tackles in history that are under 33. It's still an outlier. It doesn't mean outliers can't hit.
With tackles specifically, even the 33 is the minimum.
Low.
Right, you want 34. Right. So some teams 33 and a half, and they're like, yeah, not super interested in that even. So at some point you just have to draw a line, right? You just have to. It's like if you go have dinner, like, you have to have enough food to stay alive, right? At some point it's not
there's
enough.
thresholds. Yeah.
Like a hamburger is probably enough. I want a double cheeseburger. Hamburger is enough. but if you give me one pickle, it's not going to cut it. Like there's going to be a line.
Yeah. I need to be. I mean, can't be like, wow, Williamson's almost fast enough. No, there's no chance ever. Right. Which brings me to Restrepo. Actually, like I kind of thought of Keenan Allen. Remember how badly he ran? I want to say it was like 4.69 or 4.71.
It was either close to or 4.7-ish. Yeah, it
right
was not
in that neighborhood.
He was like injured too. So, and that's what Restrepo tried to say. He's like, man, I was a little bit injured. And it's like, man, if you should have just let people think you were slow rather than proving you were even slower than they thought.
That's like Gunnar Helm at the combine. I mean, he had this terrible ankle and no one expected him to be a good tester. And then he was a terrible tester, but then it was like, good for you for running the ankle. Like, that's good for you. Be smart.
The scouts are going to like test your manhood and be like, well, you don't want to compete. You're not going to compete. And that's what they want to see. And they want to see a complete picture too. So like you should want to see everything if you're a team and you're an NFL scout. By the way, Deion Walker is one of my favorite ones because out of Kentucky, big 6'7", 30-pound defensive tackle. He was telling people he's going to run 4.6 or something insane. And everyone's like, hey, watch out. Feldman's freak. Watch out. He's going to be – he ran like 5'3" or something. Not even remotely in the neighborhood.
Right. Like, you're just a liar. Like, you're not even close. Why even build it up? I mean, whatever that is. Underperform, over deliver, whatever that is. Exactly. Yeah. And he was total opposite. Now, the thing that bugs me, not so much all these other things we talked about, but man, I would love to have short shuttles and 3-cones on everybody. I mean, I think those are valuable drills. I mean, and we've done this for years.
Offensive linemen and like
offensive linemen.
I'm training
maybe a Restrepo or a Keenan Allen would be good in the 3-cone.
Should be. They look like they would be on film.
They should be, right? Like a JSN.
If I am training an offensive lineman, especially an interior offensive lineman, I would be working on the shuttle more than any other drill. Because if you can go out there, teams are recognizing this, and you can run a sub 4.50 shuttle, you just made yourself a whole lot of money, and you should be able to do that if you were an athletic interior offensive lineman.
I think so much of this comes back to analytics. Like we didn't know that magic number 15 years ago about short shuttles for interior linemen, but people study these and they start to find trends, and analytics is such a broad word, but it makes all the sense in the world, especially for an interior lineman. Like how many first of all, if you're on the second level trying to hit a smaller person that's not standing still, a linebacker, a safety, whatever, you're going to have to be able to change directions and operate in space. But even just as like a pass rush or a pass protector, how many guys beat you with their initial move? Just attack your left shoulder, half your body, and just win on their first move clean. Mm-hmm. Not usually. Usually it's, okay, they got me off balance on that one. I'm leaning real heavy left, and then he crosses my face and goes right, and I can't keep up because I can't change direction. You know what I mean? Like it's so applicable. Tight ends in 3-cones, edge guys in 3-cones. Slot receivers are kind of like tight ends. Keenan Allen, I bet, was really good in the 3-cone, and these guys just aren't running them. And it has to be agents saying, unless you're awesome at it, don't do it. And it has to be a really hard drill to get good at too. Like I could see it being easier to get good at the 40 and during these training sessions than something weird like a 3-cone. They're just not doing it.
Carson Schwessinger is an interesting one because he looks fast on tape. He jumped like 39.5 inches, 39-inch vertical, which is awesome at the combine. Didn't do anything else at the combine. Didn't do the UCLA pro day stuff, but then had like his own pro day at UCLA a couple days ago and didn't run a 40 still, but did the other agilities and was awesome. It was like 6.9 3-cone and like really good in everything. So everything he's done, he's been awesome at it, but he really curated when he did what he did and then still never ran a 40. And so you can kind of assume, well, the 40 is probably not great, but does it really matter? So sometimes it doesn't matter, but sometimes it does. So it's almost like per prospect, what position you play, what did you not run? And you look at those relative athletic scores that are put out there. Is it, I think it's Ken Lee Platt that does it, and it's awesome. And I love seeing them.
Oh, they're great. Yeah.
But right now, there's so many that are incomplete. I'm like, I don't even know how you could put that final grade. You almost have to put an incomplete on it because you'll see a guy that's like, oh, well, he was 6'7", ran a good 40. Well, it's like you're giving him extra credit for being tall, but does that really matter? And then you're not counting the things that he didn't do, which are really important for his position because he didn't run those. So you have like, it's a relative athletic score of 9.9. It's lit up like a Christmas tree, but really he's getting extra credit in a place where it doesn't matter. And he's getting a pass on the things that you already know he's probably not going to be good at. And if he actually did those, it would bring it down a lot. And so it's just, such an incomplete picture.
Yeah, it's like if I'm great at English and history, but terrible at math and science, and I only take the ones I'm good at and I get a 4.0, well, that doesn't mean you're the smartest kid in the grade.
I got
I just didn't take science.
SATs, and I didn't take half of it.
I took half of it. I got 800 on one side and a 0 on the other. That doesn't mean you're a perfect specimen. Real quick on Schlesinger, though, I think it's interesting you mentioned him. There's definitely a benefit if you know you're going to be a top 100 player. Maybe you could have all these sessions. Like if you're a 7th round pick from Bowling Green, I'm not sure everyone's coming to your other sessions, like traveling across the country for it. But I happened to hear an interview with him. And I guess, now we have GPS stuff everywhere, and I guess he is like UCLA's first or second fastest player in every game he's been in, including running backs and receivers. So maybe he's just smart enough to stand on that and say, hey, here's the data. My UCLA people can confirm it. I'm not going to work on my start from a 3-point stance that I'm never going to use. Just use my GPS numbers. They're good.
And that's something that needs to be more available for everybody.
Yeah.
Evaluating. And like, okay, let's go GPS, right? And I actually saw.
It won't be long.
I saw Xavier Restrepo, a breakdown of his GPS at the combine. And when he ran his go route, it was like 19 point something miles per hour, which was the lowest, like 1 percentile. So you're like, okay, top speed, not there. That checks out. But the other drills, like Gauntlet, he was like the fastest or one of the fastest.
Stuff. I mean, just a lot. So right.
Yeah. So the receivery stuff, like obviously he's not going to be a go ball guy anyway. So that's interesting. And it kind of like you start to paint the picture. So if like, okay, you don't want to test and you don't want to run a 40, that's fine. But you got to run around and we got the GPS on you. And so that, and I think you can do some great things there. And I think you could probably make some mistakes as well. But the more you have, the more educated you're going to be on your decision if you are a team. So I think it's honestly, it's not good for teams to not have all the testing numbers, but I also get why prospects don't want to do it. And it's just going to make this draft even crazier because I think it's already going to be an insane draft. Yeah. And, the NIL stuff and teams and players transferring just makes it even more haywire, I think, for NFL teams to wade through this. Next, I want to continue a conversation because we brought up Schlesinger, talk about linebackers, and there was a really interesting interview with Luke Kuechly recently, and kind of bring us all back into what really matters as far as football and these NFL draft prospects. Next. So Carson Schlesinger is a perfect example of this, and he was a former walk-on, and he's a self-made guy, and Crocker and I at Locked On 49ers, we were scouting linebackers. The 49ers lost Dre Greenlaw. They need another guy, and we were watching the linebackers, and a group of athletic linebackers, and was like, well, Carson Schlesinger is easily the best of this group. And so I think he's either number 1 or number 2 linebacker in this class. He might even sneak into the end of round 1. And then you see an interview with Luke Kuechly, and he was on a podcast. I'm not even sure what podcast it was, but he was breaking down like how he sees the game, how he studies film. He's talking about film, and it's just like some next level stuff. And this is a Hall of Fame guy, right? And he was super athletic on top of it, but he put in the work, and he's so smart. And then I hear a prospect like Tet McMillan. Did you see the video of Tet McMillan? And it's almost like someone was kind of like shadily recording him, and I don't know if he was even knowing he was being recorded or whatever. And he was talking candidly, and he's like, "Oh, I don't even really watch film. I don't like to watch film. We watch film together as a group with the wide receivers, so I don't really need to watch film." And I'm like, and so I put it out there on Twitter, and we'll see at the end of this podcast if somebody has done it. So check at BD Peacock, and we'll find the mashup. I was like, somebody mash up Tet McMillan talking about not watching tape versus this interview with Luke Kuechly, and like. You got to make decisions on who you're going to bring into your football team. You try to find guys that love it, every inch of it, watch film, can't get enough. They are driven to be as good as they possibly can. And if you find that, especially those up the middle positions, linebacker, safety, quarterback, interior offensive line, there's still a lot in the NFL that's played from the neck up, and you have to remember that. And that's where a lot of mistakes are made. And I know it's harder to really get into the mind of a prospect, especially if you have to figure out 300 personalities. But the guys who aren't going to work, that's an easy way to bust in the NFL. Yeah. And I think about Ted McMillan, and this isn't to crush Ted McMillan. He might be a Hall of Fame player himself.
Sure.
He has some awesome ability. But you start to watch him play, and you're like, okay, well, wait a second. He doesn't have great releases. That's something you have to work on a lot. Route runner leaves a lot to be desired, but he's really great going up and getting the ball. He can sky for it. He's tall. He's athletic. Well, that's the God-given stuff. And you start to be like, oh, maybe I need to drop him down a little bit in my rankings.
Yeah.
I start to put all this stuff together. And someone like Carson Schwarzenegger, who just is about that life, maybe we need to move him up. So maybe Carson Schwarzenegger should be going ahead of Ted McMillan in your mock drafts. I don't know that. So, and also I asked this question the other day too, Matt, and this is my question to you. When do you hit analysis paralysis? Because I start looking at prospects and it starts to make less and less sense at a certain point. And do teams make that mistake? Because at this stage where I'm at in draft prospect hunting and evaluation, I almost don't like anybody anymore.
I know it definitely gets to that point. I mean, you almost find more negatives. We already know the positives, speed, size, blah, 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 blah. The more you find out, it's kind of like dating. I mean, it's like, right. Who am I really going to marry? I'm going to date. Oh, she's beautiful, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, she chews with her mouth open. I can live with that. Then you keep adding to the list, Back to like McMillan versus Kuechly, though. If you're ever fortunate enough to really be around a coach or player that is a tape god, it's unbelievable. And I'm sure Kuechly, Ray Lewis, those guys fit that mold as great middle linebackers where the mind and the body actually measure up. I mean, I just wanted to double check. I mean, at his combine, Kuechly was 6'3", 242, ran a 4.58, 38-inch vertical. All his change direction stuff was awesome, even back before people had blazing times. I mean, so he was a freak athletically and above the neck. And thus you get one of the best linebackers I've ever seen, frankly, and maybe one of the most underrated I've ever seen. I think he's a slam dunk, easy Hall of Famer, no matter what. But he would probably watch film and be like, that left guard, on every time he pulls, his feet are 4 to 6 inches to the left more than, when he lines up for protection. Right. And I bet, and I'm just a total shot in the dark, I bet the Kuechlys of the cornerback position, maybe that's Pat Surtain, will look at McMillan as a rookie and be like, this guy's got tells. Like he's going to lean on the balls of his feet. He's going to, like, whatever,
4'5". I'm not worried about running with this guy. He's got no release package whatsoever. So I'm going to get up and press him, and he's going to go nowhere. And if he gets by me, I'm not worried about running with him down the field either.
Yeah, he has no inside move. All his releases are outside, and he can just throw little corners from, Arizona's opponents out of the way. Well, he can't do that to me. And, he sells his in breaking routes by his alignment or the way he bobs his head. Or, I mean, as well as anyone, Jerry Rice, every one of his stems looked exactly the same. You didn't know what route he was until he broke it off. I mean, that was what made him so awesome. It wasn't his size speed thing. Studying.
Yeah, it's and then the Bob McGinn stuff where the classic anonymous scout quotes, and sometimes you're like, man, I can't believe a team employs this anonymous scout, because not only is this weird stuff he's saying, but he's actually wrong about the scouting part of it. And like, you can't get
there is some of that in there.
There's sometimes it's like, oh, this guy's twitched up and would be a great defensive end. You're like, he's slow as hell and he's a defensive tackle. Like, what are you even looking at? Like, are you talking about a different player? What is going on? But some of the stuff is like valuable, and these teams are talking about it. And then that's where you have to get into the character. There's like personal character and there's football character. And then it's like some guys are a little bit weird, but they are Hall of Famers, right? And sometimes that little edge that a player has might rub some people the wrong way, but it makes them great too. And so it's really hard. The psychology, getting into someone's brain, is the hardest part of it, but it's the most important part of evaluation. And it's definitely the hardest part for us to watch when we're sitting here and we look at all the 40 times we're talking about centimeters of an inch and arm length and hand size and how fast a guy is. But the ones that want to be great and work to be great in the end are probably the ones.
Full-time job. Yeah. I mean, it really is. I mean, it was one of the things, not to get too crazy in the weeds, but when Larry Fitzgerald arrived at Pitt as a freshman, his maturity and tape study was already there. You know, like the small little things about his releases. And he wasn't cocky, but he would even teach the senior receivers, try this getting off the line of scrimmage or your stem. You know, like when you saw it live all the time was like, oh, he sees the game so much different. And some of it, I hate the word instinct because I don't think these guys are born with it, but some of them obviously see things better than others. It's a learned behavior. And, you know, back to even like McMillan, and I'm not picking on him because there's so many guys that qualify. And even in the media, I mean, yeah, I watch tape, but you can't watch tape like you watch Friends or Beavis and Butthead. You know, like you got to break down the very, very fine intricacies of it. It's like a math problem, you know?
No doubt. And so if anybody hasn't heard that interview, and to be honest with you, I don't even know what podcast.
Check it out, yeah.
Clips of it, Luke Kuechly talking about ball. One of the smartest. Is not a surprise. He was as great as he was. Real quick, last one here. This is from Steelers Blitz. Why is Matthew Golden skyrocketing up draft boards? Is it solely based on his 40 time? And I find this curious as well because
me too.
Everyone got him in a different spot, and a lot different spot than they did before the combine. And I just think it's curious. You run a 4.29, and all of a sudden he's your number 1 wide receiver when he was your number 4 wide receiver. Matt, what's going on there?
Well, I think some of it is there's more questions about McMillan, who is a slam dunk number 1. And so someone has to be 1. And Golden, I'm not saying his 40 time hurt him, but I think it changes the perception because he doesn't play like the fastest guy in the field. I mean, I never thought he was slow, but I don't think he's Tyreek. I don't think he's worthy like last year. I mean, I thought Bond played faster than Golden. What I thought, but I think people are overlooking how good his stop, start, come out of breaks, real receiver Antonio Brown stuff is. You know what I mean? Like that stuff's quite good to me. But I think the biggest thing is just a bad receiver draft.
Yeah, I think it was probably close enough with the top guys, and he was thought of as a first round player, and you check more boxes than the guys did. And,
yeah. And you add speed to that.
Right.
But I don't think anyone questioned his speed, but
like 4.29, does he play at 4.29? And
no.
does it mean another receiver who runs 4.5 is bad? Because 4.5 is plenty fast. Look at the Hall of Fame. You're going to find a lot of guys that ran, 4.45 to 4.55, right? Like that's a sweet spot for wide receivers. And we talk about this all the time. Find me the fastest offensive lineman, better chance that those are the better players than the fastest wide receivers in every combine.
Yeah. I forget what the term is. Yeah, acceleration's great, but how fast can you stop? How fast can you decelerate?
Deceleration, and then you're like, okay, cool. You ran a 4.2. Where's that 3 cone and short shuttle, right? So,
yeah.
All right. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen. Thanks for all the questions every single week. Apologies to the ones we did not get to, but you can always get them in early. Drop them in the YouTube comments at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Matt and I back tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.